Okay, everybody. Hopefully, this will work out. This is part two of the day I almost died. Real quickly, I want to say thank you to everybody who listened and commented and can get something out of my story. I really hope that I'm not just helping myself by being able to express, the events of the past, including the day that I was almost killed, but also take addiction and mental illness and just a seemingly inherent sense of unworthiness that just monopolized and dictated my life for really 34 years, 30 solid years from age 4 to 34. Take those experiences and hopefully like share them in a way, like I said, that's not just going to help me but actually be of beneficial, like be of service to somebody else. So thanks for watching and for bearing with me with like my technology problems. I don't know why I can't just record a full video at one time and upload it without incident, but here we are, part two. Okay, so where I left off, um, I was saying lowering my blood pressure, bleeding out in a puddle of blood, waiting on the paramedics to arrive. The universe and I are one. I was saying my hong on the inhale and saw on the exhale and try not to go to sleep. When I watched the guy I was dating slit his throat for the last time, and it was a really, like I said, a deep cut. He almost, it looked like he was going to chop his head off. I don't know if that would like technically be possible, but it was really, really gruesome. It was shocking. And he dropped the knife, his hunting knife, and slumped down. And I reached to grab it. In the back of my mind, I was aware of the thought, like, man, if this was a horror movie, I would be like, you dummy, for not like holding on to the knife. But, it was horrific. And it was like a bad dream or like a nightmarish horror movie that I was living, but it wasn't a movie. It was real life. And so what I did, I just did not want that knife next to me. It wasn't even like I was afraid he was going to do anything. I just knew when he slit his throat that last time in front of me in the hallway that the carnage was over, that the damage was done. And so I grabbed the knife and I just threw it as far as I could across the room. I just didn't want to be near it. It just bothered me that it was laying beside of me. And when I reached down to grab it, that was when I noticed my hand. You can see it's like, oh, you can see the hook because he cut me at some point on the top of my hand with the hawk bill. That's why it has a little hook, and it cut from my thumb wrist area to my ring finger. And when I grabbed the knife, I was taken aback again because I saw my bones. And I had never seen my bones before. I'd never seen any bones. And here I am looking at the bones in my hand. And when I grabbed it, I was watching my hand move internally. And I was almost like transfixed by the scene. It was horrific. But I had never seen, it was the most pristine shade of white I've ever seen to this day. The bones and the way the white of my bone was juxtaposed with, the fatty, the tissue and the blood, it just looked so pristine. And I think I was also in shock. So I reached down, I threw the hunting knife, and I laid my head like this. I just kind of slumped over and I laid my head on my arm, and I tried to keep my chin like pulled back so as not to, gape my neck open, and try to help with like clotting or at least slowing the bleeding, and say the universe and I are one, hong saw in my head. And the next thing I know, I hear a commotion, and finally, like the EMTs had arrived. I think I passed out because and that the next thing I know, it seemed like instantaneously, but I think I must have passed out. And they went to him because he was first, and I guess they wanted to make sure. I don't know. I don't know why. For whatever reason, they started assessing him, and I was kind of surprised when I heard the commotion of the paramedics coming through the door. They came in like the back entrance, the entrance that was furthest away from the hallway Joe and I were laying in. And for a split second, I was like, oh, they're here. Help is here. And that fear rushed through me again, because I thought, my God, what if he does something in this moment? But they got to us immediately and started assessing him first. And I was surprised that he was alive. And he said, leave me alone, help her. And they said, we have to help you. And I said, they said that to him. They said, we have to help you. And I said, yes, please, just please help me. And they loaded me up and took me in the back of an ambulance and had to do a procedure called an IO. That's when I was first told also that it looked like I had lost half the blood in my body. A male EMT said that, and it turns out later in the hospital I found out that was correct. They had to give me, I can't remember what the measurement was, but they said it was whatever units. It was like half the blood was gone. They had to do a procedure called an IO in the back of the ambulance, and I had never thought about the logistics of what happens when someone has like a car accident or a really serious injury. They're bleeding profusely. Getting blood is imperative in a situation where there's, a lot of carnage, but yet obviously the veins aren't viable. Like, what do they do? I never really thought about it. And they do a procedure called an IO. You can Google it. I feel like I'm going to mispronounce it. Instead of an IV, like intravenous, it's an IO, oscular. I don't know how to say it. I asked a doctor what it was, and I still cannot pronounce it. And what they did, she told me it was a Southern like mama EMT, like a veteran paramedic. I was so glad it was a woman. And I really liked this paramedic. She spoke to me with like blunt compassion. And, you could tell she was a veteran paramedic. She was like a Southern mama. She had seen some shit. And she said, I'm telling you, this is going to hurt. This is going to hurt worse than having a baby. This is going to be the worst pain you've ever felt, and I got to do it. Are you ready? And it was 100% rhetorical, because then she proceeded to drill holes, 2 holes, maybe more. I think I like passed out, or it was horrific. She drilled holes into my kneecaps to funnel, I guess like blood into my marrow, because obviously like I needed blood. A vein was not an option. I was just, like full. He had filleted me, like my upper torso so much. I had to get blood, and she drilled these holes, and it felt like what it was. It felt like holes being drilled into you, and then they funneled. It just felt like fire was funneled. It was the worst physical pain I've ever experienced. And she said, I don't know if this is what she said, or if this was like, if I was not, I think I was drifting in and out, because she said, I think the paramedic said, he's right behind you. Do you know that? And I looked back and I thought, there's no one in this ambulance. He's in a different ambulance. And I said, what? What are you talking about? Where is he? And then the driver of the ambulance said, are we going to take them to Raleigh General or the other hospital? I don't know which one to go to. And she said, the paramedic said, it doesn't matter, pick one, or she's going to die back here. And that's when it dawned on me again, like, oh my God, I could still die. And see my hand, like, God, it like makes me kind of shaky to talk about this sometimes, but my ring finger, my right hand is it's permanently curved, because I was in surgery for 48 hours. It was only about 8 hours on my neck, my face sewed up here, and the rest of the stitches. I obviously had hundreds of stitches, but my hands were like 15 hours, because they had to reach in on my ring finger and like take some of the tendons out to reconnect my tendons on my right hand to make it a viable hand again. And my hands were in splints for a month. Actually more than that. It was definitely more than that, because I had physical therapy. I was in the hospital for 3.5 weeks, and I had physical therapy for a couple months. And when I was released from the hospital, mom still had to wash my hair, help me button my pants. Like I didn't have use of my hands at all. And you never know how much you take your hands for granted until it's like, wow, I can't feed myself. I can't do anything. This hand was covered. When it was like that, the splint it was curved to give my hand time to, like, I guess the tendons to fuse. And my left hand was the opposite. Instead of curved, it was upright. These two fingers were like locked into a position. And I only had the top two joints because he cut straight down between my ring and middle finger, my left hand. So this hand was like that permanently, and my other hand was completely covered. And I could see it took over a month for the blood to get out of my fingernails. It was like bloody crescent moons. And so when I woke up in the hospital, the first thing I remember, really like fully waking up after the surgeries and after being airlifted to the bigger hospital in the state capital, it was I came to, and I could hear my mom talking to a nurse behind me, and she said to the nurse, she said, does she know he's dead? And that's how I found out Joe had died. I didn't know he was dead until I overheard my mother talking. And of course the state trooper was like already there wanting to get like information and details about what happened. And there wasn't anything to say, and he was like, well, I think he wanted to die. He just wanted to take someone else out with him when he went. He was like he was a smart ass, shocker. But, and I'm like, well, who wants to die alone? That's what I thought. But, it wasn't even like that, it just was this horrible thing that happened, and I was in the hospital, like I said, for 3.5 weeks. And I was like, man, everything in my life has culminated to this moment. My relationships from the get-go just got worse and worse and worse in a lot of ways, more toxic, more extreme. My addiction, my like this love addiction and unchecked mental illness, and just at the base of it all, this feeling of like unworthiness and like inability to live. And it culminated in meeting this person who also, I guess, had similar feelings. And this is what happened. It was just a horrific thing. And ever since puberty, I felt like, since middle school, I truly felt like it just seemed easier for other people to live. It was like everybody got this like handbook or like a Cliff's Notes on like how to be a human being, how to be a functional person. And I just felt like I was like missing the boat. Like life just seemed easier. And it didn't matter how much, time I spent in like recovery communities, going to NA meetings or rehabs, or listening to like success stories, like, oh, this is my rock bottom, my before and after. And Glennon Doyle is like, oh, as for example, she's like, oh, we can do hard things. You can do hard things. And it's like, no, Glennon, you can do hard things. You're like this well-to-do, which is like, I don't know. It's just like, I just felt like I couldn't. And I lived up to that feeling of inadequacy. And I knew in the hospital, like, I'm looking back and I was like, my God, when I just was so sure I was ready for death. And then in this moment, I didn't, even think about it. It's like it was like my soul had made, it felt like my soul had made this like power move and demanded, after 30 years of, oh, I can't do that, I can't live, I just, there's no place for me, after like 30 years of that, and people pleasing and perfectionism, and just, you know, driving towards like this cliff, proverbially speaking. Proverbially, is that a word? Anyway, I felt like my soul had made this like power move, and like demanded that I live with authenticity, even if I continue to act from my ego. It's like I almost felt like I had manifested this horrific event in my life, by being attracted to such, violence, and, you know, and so I'm like processing all of this. And that was really like, I could not pretend like that didn't happen, and I was like, if I do not really just, assume that when I think I'm not worthy, or I think I'm not good enough, or unable, just if I do not assume that, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, um, I do have a place in this world. I am worthy of life. I am capable, of living because I am worthy. If I don't operate from that baseline, I am going to be dead. And as it turns out, I do not want to die. And so, it's weird to say that that relationship was like the best thing that ever happened to me. Um, but it was, because I wouldn't be alive if my boyfriend had not tried to kill me. And I guess, the best, the deepest, most, impactful lessons are always learned like through, the worst circumstances. And that was, hellish. With, PTSD, it was strange. It dawned on me in the hospital that I had PTSD. And that was the first time I had thought about it, when I was like, why do I feel, so nervous? Why is my, mid sentence, like I would like lose my breath, lose my train of thought, and just like go into a state of like a frozen panic almost internally. And I was like, oh my God, I can't sleep. I'm like, debilitated out of nowhere with like panic. That's PTSD. And the first time I thought about the inevitability of having PTSD was when I realized I had it, and I felt kind of silly, like, wow, I should have seen this coming. But the bulk of the PTSD came from, ironically, the moment right before he slit my throat. Like I said, the sound, something about the sound of my neck ripping, and the every time he had made contact, I found that very alarming, and that kind of, comprised a minority of the PTSD, but the bulk of it was, the moment right before he, cut my throat and nicked his. It was like simultaneously, because like I said, he had a knife in each hand. It was, it was a moment. It's the only time I've ever known true fear, and I did not know that I had not experienced true fear until, I experienced terror, like true terror. Because, like I said in the other video, I kept thinking, this isn't going to happen. Situation is going to like wind down, take a different route. Even when we were like in this bear hug standoff, we were seated on the floor. His legs were over top of mine. I didn't say that in the last video, so I could not move. We were seated. His legs were over top of mine. His arms were around me. I could not move. And I thought, we were going to be okay. It wasn't going to go down the way it did. And when I realized he has had this psychotic break, he is going to try to kill me. There is no avoiding what is about to happen. That the fear, it engulfed me. I was literally filled with terror. I was filled to the point of overflowing with with fear, and I had not known true fear before that moment. And that feeling of just like absolute terror, the true fear completed me. In that moment, it completes a person, and it completed me. And that fear is was what the bulk of my PTSD was comprised of. It was just side note, the the orgasm, la petite mort, maybe little death. I had heard this fun fact that orgasm, the French called orgasms little death. And I always wondered, where did that come from? That doesn't make any sense. Why would they say that? Why would they call an orgasm little death? And fun fact, because of this experience, I understand it now. I think because the fear and the feeling of being cut up, but yet not feeling physical pain, but I could feel something, but it wasn't pain. It was the adrenaline, and just I could feel air rushing into these wounds, and I could feel like air kind of hitting me internally in an unnatural way. And my body and my psyche and my soul was just like tingling with adrenaline and sensation, and just, and this fear. I was like an animal. And an orgasm, I'm not trying to be graphic, but it's the truth. An orgasm is the only other feeling physically or sensation or experience that I have ever felt that has compared to the fear that I felt right before he slit my throat and during the attack. And what I mean by that is, I think that's why the French call orgasms little death, because that's what it felt like. Not pleasure, but when you have an orgasm, it's like you are truly engulfed. It's like your mind goes blank. You cannot think about anything for that split second. You cannot think about anything but the pleasure. You are just engulfed in pleasure. And that's how it was when he was about to kill me, and during the attack. I couldn't think of anything but the opposite, but fear and survival. And it's like I was engulfed, and my mind was erased, and my soul had, like I said, made this power move. And the fight or flight, as I've said, was the absolute biggest takeaway. It I could see my layered thoughts. They were like almost like a filing cabinet. When right before I kicked him, I felt gratitude for keeping my sneakers on, and I was aware that I was feeling gratitude. For example, I was aware that I was like, thank you, God, literally, for that I have my shoes on. I was aware that I felt gratitude, but yet it was in the back of my mind. When I watched the air underneath him when I kicked him, when I was aware that time was moving differently, but these were like secondary thoughts in the back of my mind. It's like I was aware of the thoughts, but they were not taking precedent. And it's like, my God, to know that as someone who has dealt with just mental problems my entire life, and worse than that, personality problems, when you have a personality that's weird or quirky, that's amazing. But if you don't love yourself, it's hard to live. If you don't accept yourself and you're strange or feel strange, it's very hard to live. And as someone who has dealt with perfectionism and being neurotic and being so anxious, and I was clinically self-conscious. I wish there should be a term for that. I was too self-conscious to function in the world without just immense frenzy and despair and just perceived awkwardness, And as someone who has dealt with that, just an out of control, frustrating, just debilitatingly anxious mind their entire life from age 4 to 34. There was never a time where I had confidence. There was never a time where I loved my body, loved myself, where I spoke with authenticity. I was always, from literally pre-K on, I was kind of basing my personality, my reactions, my everything on how I thought other people wanted me to be, or my expectations, of other people's expectations. It was fucking exhausting. And to have spent your entire life to age 34 dealing with this mind, and then to realize, like, wow, I can have these thoughts, I can have whatever thoughts, but that does not mean that I have to base my life, my worth, my anything on these thoughts. That was mind-boggling. That was everything. That was the catalyst of changing my life, and my God, from 2019, my life has just gotten better and better and better every year. And, I've quit smoking. I've lost 35 plus pounds. It's almost like 39 at this point, because I'm continually getting my health under control. I finally, I was single, and I was so happy being single. I was like truly content being single for the rest of my life, if that's the way it was going to work out. But, I ended up meeting someone that I was friends with in high school, and we were truly like friends. He cracked me up, and then he moved away, and we didn't see each other for 19 years, which is amazing in and of itself. In this small county, we didn't see each other for 19 years. And maybe I'll tell my love story like another time, but I get to live the life now that I did not think was possible for me. And it didn't matter, when other people would say, oh, you're too pretty to do this, or, you need to do this and to do that, and to go to an NA meeting, and to, use your bachelor's degree and get a good job. It didn't matter when people would say things, because I felt, I didn't have a sense of identity. I didn't have a sense of self that was based. I couldn't be myself. And learning how to cultivate that relationship with myself, and love myself, and love life, and love, God, and just everything. It's incredible. I've started, writing and meditating, and I've been writing now since 2020. Everything in life I did not begin to live until after that, the day that I almost died. So, I just wanted to share this with anybody. It's taken me 5 years to like really tell this story, because, that's the outside version, but changing is hard, even when you know you're on the right track and you have every motivation literally in the world to do so. Change is still hard, and really learning how to love myself, growing that trust with myself, and self-love, and everything. It's taken time, and it's taken a lot of therapy, and a lot of unlearning, and all the therapy in the world, until I decided that I loved myself enough to take a chance on myself and say, hey, I think I'm going to start journaling. That's something I want to do. Why am I stopping myself from doing it? Just, saying yes to myself and staying up late and beginning to journal. That was what cured my PTSD, and actually got me past like the trauma of the day. But just speaking with confidence and self-love, it's a work in progress, so hopefully this will help somebody, and y'all have a good night.